Hello, everyone, and welcome to yet another session of communication research. I will quickly go through what we discussed in our previous video on communication research. So, we discussed why research is a necessary evil, which all fields is it needed in, and what counts for research. Like research is needed in decision making situations, it is needed to describe the media, it is needed to analyze the media effects on consumers, and also to understand the audience's behavior. Then we also talked about how to determine a relevant topic. How do you know which topic to research on? Is the topic too broad, or can the problem really be investigated? Are the data susceptible to analysis, and whether the problem is significant at all? Then there were additional questions which determine the relevance of a topic to be researched, like whether the results of the study can be generalized in different situations, contexts, and societies. Then what costs and what kind of time is involved in completing the research project, and whether there is a planned approach which is appropriate to the project or not. And then we also talked about if there is any potential harm which is involved to the subjects. So, having spoken about these things, then we discussed what is reviewing a literature and what is the importance of review of literature. We first discussed what exactly literature is and what is the available literature in any field of study, what was done, how it can be done better, what are the results that are available with us, and more important step in research process, which was about facilitating learning from previous research. And why is it important? Why should we do this? Because it helps us save time, effort, money, all our resources, which we would like to focus on the project. Then there were also a few questions that we discussed in the previous video, like what type of research has been done in this area and what has been found in those studies, and whether there are some suggestions that the previous researchers have made. After studying this, we also looked at how this proposed study can add to our knowledge in the area, what research methods were used in the previous studies, and the answers to these questions we thought would help in defining a hypothesis or formulate research questions. Then we discussed about what hypothesis is and what research questions are, and the fact that hypothesis is a formal statement regarding the cause-effect relationship of the variables that we're talking about in the study. And the research question is the formally stated question, the answers to which will help us find the answers to the initial objectives that we began the research study with. And this is not limited to investigating relationships only between the variables. So this is what hypothesis and research questions are. Research questions are used when the researcher is unsure about the nature of the problem that is going to be investigated. It helps in gathering preliminary data. It is a testable hypothesis that we are able to develop from research question phase. Now we will be talking about the area of study and setting up of objectives. The first thing is that the study area can be based on various factors. One of the factor is the source, as in from where does a particular information originate. If you're talking about fake news, where did that fake news first originate? Was it on social media platform? Was it on one of the messengers? Where has it originated from? So to give you a more appropriate example, let us say the research at hand is that what is the brand manager's perception of corporate social responsibility campaigns? And the study title is Brand Managers' Perceptions of Social Responsibility Campaign, a study of leading newspapers of India. So obviously, there are various things that comprise the study, one of which is the source of which we will be talking, the brand managers themselves. Why? Because we are looking at the perception of these brand managers and how they feel the corporate social responsibility campaigns and efforts are being formulated by a certain company. So we are looking at the perspective of the brand managers. So they are the source of our information for this research. Having said that, the other aspect is message or the content that we are going to study. This content could be the text, which could be digital or otherwise. It could be audiovisual, it could be audio or podcasts, or it could be a combination of any of these. I will give you another example. Now, look at this research problem, which says coverage of crime news against women in national channels, a study of primetime news of Channel X and Channel Y. So, here we are trying to study how crime against women is being covered by national channels. What is their perspective? How are they covering it? And what sort of coverage are they providing to us? So it could be both qualitative as well as quantitative. Here we are analyzing the content or the message that that particular TV channel is providing on a certain issue at hand, which is crime against women. So this is how we study the message of the content. Then the third thing is channel or medium. Now this channel could be either print or radio or television. It could be online. It could be out of home, OOH, all these media platforms. It can even be OTT platforms. So which medium are you trying to study, and what certain aspects of it you're trying to study is what we would like to know in this. So look at this example here. Effect of OOH brand endorsements on consumers of consumer durables. A study of working class of Delhi NCR. So here we are trying to look at how a certain channel is making use of OOH brand endorsements and how these brand endorsements are affecting the sale or purchase of consumer durables. So we are looking at the working class population of, say, for example, Delhi. So here, this is the way this is studied. Now, when we look at the receivers aspect, receivers means the audiences of all media. It is not necessary that a reader of a newspaper will not be looking at the TV channel. So, how are audience perceiving it? Or what do audiences have in mind when they are looking at certain content or certain messages from the media? So look at this example, corporate social responsibility and image building. Study of NTPC Dadri. What are we doing here? We are trying to look at the corporate social responsibility efforts of a certain company and how it is being perceived by the audiences. It is only for the audiences that this company must be doing its corporate social responsibility efforts, and campaigns must be running on this. So the efforts that are being made, how is the audience viewing it? How is the audience trying to understand this is the question at hand. So this is the receiver study. Then, having said this, let us also look at the objectives that are being set when we are deciding upon a research topic. Now, any research obviously begins with the setting of objectives. It is only the curiosity of the researcher on certain area or certain subject that leads one to conduct a research. So when we talk about setting of objectives, we know that the objectives can be bifurcated into two kinds, which is one of which is the broad objectives and the other is the specific objective. Understand this by the help of another example. Let us try and design the objectives for this research problem. Gratifying entertainment needs of PG students, a study of FM culture in Delhi NCR. So, for this question, the broad objective is to look at what sort of gratification, entertainment gratification, are postgraduate students of Delhi looking for. And we are trying to study the FM culture here. And that becomes our broad objective. Specific objectives would be to understand whether postgraduate students and spend time with FM radio or not, whether they use FM radio for entertainment purposes or not, whether they find that their entertainment needs have been gratified by this FM channel or not. So, and then which ones are the other channels that they find better than the others that are available to them. So all of them together make specific objective. So specific objective is when you break down the broad objective into smaller terms, measurable, achievable terms, which become your specific objective. So this is how we set the objectives for any kind of research. Next, we should look at variables. Now, what is a variable? A variable, like I was talking previously, that it could be a connect between two things that you're trying to study in a research project. So it is important to understand what are concepts which are related to variables? A concept basically is an abstract idea which is formed by generalization from a particular idea. So, say for example, audience involvement and speech anxiety. Now, because we are looking at, like, say for example, in the previous study, we were trying to see how audiences perceive a certain thing. So, what is the kind of audience involvement in something? I'll give you one example. In OTT platforms, there is a lot of interactivity which is built in from the OTT handlers and the people who are the managers of that OTT platform and the audiences. So we see that people comment on the content that they absorb, and those comments are can be in the form of questions which are then answered by the OTT managers. So what is audience involvement here? The way audiences are interacting is the audience involvement. So for any research which is related to, say for example, the kind of interaction that the audiences have with a certain OTT platform, audience involvement can become a concept. So there are certain concepts and certain constructs. Another example could be speech anxiety. So what is it which will comprise speech anxiety? Say for example, you're trying to study speech anxiety amongst teenagers when they go for public speaking. So what is it that comprises speech anxiety? Which all elements? Whether it is the fact that they've forgotten their points, or whether it is that they do not have the confidence to stand on a stage and speak in front of multiple audiences. Which aspect of it, what all will denote speech anxiety, is the concept here. So once you've decided upon that operational definition of speech anxiety, it becomes your concept. These variables, what they ideally do is they reduce the detail to be explained by combining particulars in general categories. Okay, so say for example, consuming media, say for example, whether it is TV or whether it is social media or whatever. So, and we call them TAFEs. So for all research purposes, whenever we are using this term, it will be understood by the readers of this research and as well as by the investigators, by the researchers themselves, that what all will comprise this term TAFE. Facilitating this communication among those who have a shared understanding of concepts. So, say for example, agenda setting. We understand that from the theory of an agenda setting, that media, they say, sets the agenda for the people. On the contrary, media feels that audiences set the agenda for the media because whatever they want to see, media tries to show that. Now, when we say we facilitate communication between those people who understand what agenda setting in media is, we provide our operational definitions in a way that, say for example, if we are talking about agenda setting in social media, so there we will be able to exactly pinpoint what all forms agenda setting, or what all forms agenda setting for television. When we are able to draw our boundaries, when we are able to understand clearly what forms a part of agenda setting and what is not a part of agenda setting, that is what we call a construct. So this is basically a combination of, we are combining various factors that will be in agenda setting to come up with this concept. And this concept will hold good for the research that one is doing. For another research, I can have another operational definition for agenda setting. Having said that, it is also important to understand what constructs are. So far, we were talking about concepts, and let us look at now what construct is. Now, a construct is a combination of concept. So say for example, if we are talking about the dependency of audiences on a certain social media platform and the kind of agenda that a social media platform sets for the people to engross themselves with. So here, construct can combine both these aspects. While these are being combined, let me also lay down for you what the characteristics of a construct is. The first thing is the meaning. The meaning of a construct relates only to the context which is being studied. So like I said, agenda setting can be different for a research which is trying to look at social media as compared to that which is trying to look at the television and its agenda setting. So the meaning of a construct is relating to the context only. It could be, now when I say context, it could be the kind of media, like I say social media and television. It can also be the kind of community or society that we're studying. Say, for example, tribal society, or for example, the metropolitan towns and cities. So the context will be important when we are forming a construct. Another example, media literates. Who will we call media literates, and what is the context? Are we studying this in context of schoolgoers? Are we studying it in terms of postgraduate students, or are we studying it in terms of housewives? Who is it that we are trying to study? So that context is important to develop any construct. So once your context is ready, you know which concepts to combine in order to call it a construct. So that is important to understand. Also, we'll have to appreciate that constructs would be abstract and they cannot be directly observed. So while it is abstract and cannot be directly observed, yet when you're creating a construct, the way you are looking at the variables and the way a kind of cause-effect relationship is clear at the end of the research, you will be able to bring out the facts related to these constructs after the study. Now let us look at what are variables. Now a variable is an empirical counterpart of a construct or concept. It is important in research. You can only establish something, or you can only reach a conclusion when you know that there is something measurable here. Research is not research if it is not measurable, if it is not observable, and it is not definable. So variable is that empirical part of a construct or a concept. What are the characteristics of these variables? One is that they link the empirical world to theoretical. Let me tell you how. When we say that heavy viewers of media learn to understand reality in a different manner. So for them, reality is not what is real, reality is what is perceived. Having said this, the link between empirical world and theoretical needs to be measured. If we are trying to measure this in context of social media, that people who spend a lot of time on social media end up believing a certain context of reality, which may not be completely real, but it is real for them because they are spending so much time absorbing that kind of content. So when you create an empirical measurement of it, as in how many people feel such way, what is the age group, for how long have you conducted the study? So those are the empirical linkages, of the audiences to the theoretical underpinnings that we initially came up with. So in order that a variable be able to decide this properly, it is important that it links the empirical to the theoretical. Then the second aspect is that they can be measured or manipulated in research. What does this mean? And manipulation, just to mention this, is not a negative connotation at all, is not a negative word at all. Manipulation only means that you change the input to some extent for the audiences that you're studying. For example, if you are looking at the reading habits of children, and what you start doing is you start giving some certain books or magazines or comic books over a period of a few months. And then you measure how have their reading habits changed. That is what we call a manipulation. So manipulation is not at all a negative term. Manipulation is necessary whenever we are performing any kind of experimental study. Now let us look at what are the two kinds of variables, one of which is dependent variable and the other is independent variable. Speaking of independent variables first, independent variables are the variables that can be manipulated. Their values do not depend on the effects of independent variables. So say for example, if we say that because there is internet provision, so someone is able to give more time to online feeds, or they are able to understand or read through the diverse content that is available on digital media. So something which has been manipulated here is availability of digital content. Okay, so independent variables are those variables which can be manipulated, like digital content in this case is an independent variable. Okay, so look at the example that we have here. Gratifying entertainment needs of PG students a study of FM culture in Delhi NCR. This is the example that we just discussed some time back, and it talks about FM culture. Now, FM culture, whether you're using it or not using it, liking it, not liking it, spending enough time to gratify your entertainment needs or not giving it any time, it does not create any effect on FM culture per se. That is why we call it independent. Nevertheless, it can be manipulated. When I say it can be manipulated, I can set up that for PG students during the break time, whenever they are in the canteen area, the FM music will always be on, or the FM radio will always be on to give whatever information that FM gives or whatever songs that it plays. So what does it indicate? That it is independent. It is not dependent on anything else, this variable, yet it can be manipulated. So this is an independent variable. Now let us look at dependent variable. When we talk about dependent variable, what the researcher wishes to explain, their values depend on effects of independent variable. So whatever the researcher is explaining or how the value of it is changing, say for example, somebody has done a master's program in mass communication and ends up getting a job in the media industry or in media academics, as compared to someone who has only done a bachelor's and is not able to find any job. So what are we doing here? This is a dependent variable. The job that you're finding is dependent on your educational qualification. This is why it is called a dependent variable. Now, this is not manipulated and it can only be measured and observed. Now look at this example. Again, gratifying entertainment needs of PG students, a study of FM culture in Delhi NCR. Now, entertainment needs and its gratification is the dependent variable. What is it dependent on? It is dependent on the independent variable, which is FM culture. So this is called a dependent variable. The PG students are depending on radio, are depending on FM to gratify their entertainment needs. So when the result is affected directly by another variable, that kind of a variable is called dependent variable. And a third kind of variable is also discrete variables, which cannot be divided into subparts, right? So say for example, family. Now the size of a family can be 2 or 3. It cannot be 2.5. So you cannot divide it into a subpart. So also population or gender, etc. So these are very discrete kind of variables. So these are the 3 kind of variables which we use when we are formulating any kind of research. And then there are also continuous variables. There were discrete variables where you could not break it into many things. Here in continuous variables, it is in range. So it can be meaningfully broken into parts or fractions. So say for example, time spent on watching TV. It can be 2.5 hours, but the size of a family cannot be 2.5. Or the height of children in a class. It could be ranging from say 155 centimeter to 160 centimeter. But this cannot be done in other terms. So this is the difference between discrete and continuous variables. So with that, I hope you are clear with how do we choose a topic, how do we make a hypothesis, what are the areas and which areas can we choose to study, as well as how do we set up the objectives. Besides that, we also learnt about variables in terms of dependent, independent, continuous and discrete variables. I hope you have gathered enough from this session, and please join me again for the next video. Thank you all very much.